This is the Baunfire Gaming Podcast, episode 351. I am your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about PlayStation 5 prices are going up, Escape from Tarkov announces their 1.0 launch, The Division 2 Survivors is announced, and much more. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, and subscribe to the Bon Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Let's get right into the gaming news. We're going to kick it off with PlayStation 5 announcing the prices are going up $50 for each of their main SKUs in the USA. This follows months of this being assumed it would happen. Xbox raised the prices of their consoles a couple months ago. PlayStation raised the prices of the PS5 in other regions a while back, but are only just now actually doing it in the USA. This is weird, right? By this point in the generation, we're 5 years in, we would be assuming discounts at this point, right? At least for the original launch devices, right? The mid-gen refreshes like the PS5 Pro, maybe not. But even the Switch 1 got price raises recently. Not the Switch 2. Those are absolutely coming, but they will probably wait until after Christmas. I suspect, and I think this is what happened with PlayStation as well. I think that Nintendo and Sony got so much inventory into the United States before these tariffs hit and all the chaos of the tariffs happened that I suspect they were able to just stay this off for quite a while. On the inverse, Xbox, it seems like it's been kind of a known secret for a while that they just probably aren't making very many Xbox consoles at this point, Series S or X. I'm under the impression they're kind of hard to find out in the world. I'm sure you can order them from anywhere because of how that inventory works, but I'm under the impression that the stock is fairly low on those, which is why I assume they raised their prices so early in this whole debacle, because they just didn't have the stock on hand in the United States to push off having to raise prices, because, you know, once the devices you're selling are ones that you had to pay tariffs on, you know, no company is going to eat that, especially 5 years in to this generation. So I suspect, you know, with Nintendo and especially with Sony here, the reason this is happening right now is because their, you know, stocks that they had are probably getting low, and now they you know, they don't want to eat that. We also, you know, not too long ago heard rumors or saw some speculation that the Xbox, they actually are making money on them. That's probably post price raise for the ones they do actually sell, even though it's not nearly as many as the other platforms. But that it was very likely that even though at one point there was a short time where the PlayStation 5 was profitable as hardware, it would have been very minimal, but still profitable is better than not. And it's rare with hardware. It's likely it hasn't been profitable in a long time. It definitely wasn't recently. And they are raising these prices. And it may not even be profitable with these price jumps. $50, you know, if that makes it profitable, it's not by much. So, you know, that margin is still extremely thin if there is one at all. This was kind of, you know, funny just because there was so much determination amongst some of the PlayStation kind of fanboys that this was not going to happen. They've, you know, sold double the number of PlayStations as Xboxes. They aren't worried about, you know, raising the prices or profit margins, all that stuff. And then this inevitably happens, right? And that shouldn't be surprising to anyone. I really don't think sometimes people fully comprehend or consider, you know, the possibility that Sony may not be doing great money-wise right now. I know that there were recently some financial reports that were showing that they took in a lot of income, which they almost always do. We've seen that back to the leaked documents during the Activision Blizzard King acquisition by Xbox, when Microsoft accidentally leaked a bunch of documents they weren't supposed to. It showed even back then that PlayStation, you know, takes in a ton of money. The problem is that due to their extremely expensive and long development cycle first party games, they don't they spend a lot of money too. They spend a ton of money. One of my favorite stats from that, and if you've listened for a while, you'll probably be rolling your eyes hearing me say this again. But what was so crazy is that on actual like money made, at least on that old chart, PlayStation had I think it was as much, if not more, than Xbox and Nintendo put together on actual money they took in. But even then, on actual profit margin, Xbox actually made more profit than PlayStation did, despite making way less money. And Nintendo made more profit than Xbox and PlayStation together. And while I'm sure the things have changed and those margins aren't all the same as they were and everything, that story probably still holds. And especially recently with PlayStation, they've had the issue of they had a game like Concord come out, be out for a week, and then get shut down, and they shut the studio down after paying a relatively substantial amount of money for that studio and that IP not too long before. They've had, presumably, some reported and some assumed, almost every one of their first party studios working on a live service game of some capacity for some amount of time, and then those being canceled. So, like Naughty Dog with The Last of Us, and I believe Sony Santa Monica with a God of War live service type game that ended up not happening. Like that costs a lot of money because it not only costs money, but it gets zero return. It's purely wasted, right? Now we're in a situation with Destiny, Destiny's developer, Bungie, where they have Marathon in the works, which, unless they pull off some miracle, already seems like it's in the dumps. And I, to this day, still don't believe that Marathon's ever actually going to release. I think maybe they kick it out and see if it can make anything back, or it gets the Concord treatment as well. While Bungie doesn't exactly have its best reputation in its history, and Destiny 2 still seems to be plodding along, but isn't the big hit that it was at one point. And it's not the big moneymaker, the big live service game that PlayStation has been desperately trying to get from all of their studios, with the only real successful one, ironically, coming from a third-party studio with Helldivers 2, which is about to launch on Xbox. Whole different conversation there. We won't get into it today. But actually we will later, but in a different angle. So these price jumps shouldn't be surprising. What's crazy is I see a possibility that PlayStation has a new console 2 to 3 years from now. Xbox has a new console 1 to 2 years from now. And it wouldn't even surprise me if the prices of the current gen goes up before then. And then you get into the conversation of good Lord, what are these new consoles going to cost? What is a PlayStation 6 going to cost? What is a Xbox, whatever terrible name they give it, going to cost? Oh my gosh, the rumors recently have been that the PlayStation 6 may actually be a fairly budget device that's not that much more powerful than the PlayStation Pro, with a lot of focus on PSSR/FSR, leaning on that a lot, where the Xbox that's coming out presumably in the next year or two could be a actually very powerful device that's also going to be very expensive. That could be closer to 1,000 than 500, which starts to put us in some weird territory. But after these price jumps for PlayStation 5, that PlayStation 5 Pro is $750 now. And if I remember correctly, that 2 terabyte limited edition, whatever, Series X, after their price jumps a while back, I think was $750 as well. Kind of a unique situation because of the extra memory and how much it costs for Xbox and blah, blah, blah. But still, you're literally at the medium point between 500 and 1,000. And, you want to assume that the next consoles won't be more than 750, but, who knows? So, these price jumps, I'm not going to celebrate this. I feel bad for people who wanted the PlayStation 5, who are still, on the PS4, and they've been waiting for price drops, and they are not getting them. And it, at this point, at least, looks like they will never get them. I wouldn't be surprised if these prices hold until the day the new consoles come out, and then we'll have to see what happens then. Maybe they discount them after the PlayStation 6 comes out. I have no idea. I think almost what's more likely is they just stop making them and sell out the rest of the inventory at the price and move on to the next gen, but we'll have to wait and see. Escape from Tarkov's developer Battlestate Games has announced the 1.0 final version launch of the game on November 15th of 2025. This is going to be interesting. I have been playing Tarkov for 4 or 5 years at this point, I believe. I've got thousands of hours in that game. Admittedly, if I've been playing it for 4 or 5 years, the 75% of those hours I did in the first year or two. It was very front loaded, my time with that game. I still dabble here and there, but for various reasons, I don't really play it much anymore, both because of the game and not. This is likely, I think, going to be one of the biggest crap shows ever for a early access game going full release. Partially because it's been 8 years that it's been in early access. And you would think oh, wow, they really took their time. That game must be polished and ready to roll. And that would tell me that you don't know anything about Escape from Tarkov, because what is actually happening is that there's issues in the game that have been issues for almost a decade now, almost since launch. They have heavily prioritized, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, putting out new stuff and not fixing old stuff. And I understand that, or I assume that with game development and all this stuff, if you only add new stuff when everything old is fixed, you'll never add new stuff. I understand that, and the issue there. But it's pretty bad here. For instance, their most recent update, the last one they've put out before this 1.0 launch, had a bug where you could have a grenade launcher in this, somewhat realistic, very grounded game that, when you die, you lose everything you have. You can be one shot killed from across the map with the right shot in the right place. This game that's fairly grounded. There was a glitch where if you took a grenade launcher in with one round, you had unlimited ammo and you didn't have to reload. So it worked like a semi-auto gun. So as fast as you could click was as fast as you could fire off grenades all over the map, and they did damage. They killed things. I don't think it was in the PvP, so the person-in-person servers, but it was in the PvE servers where it's essentially a single-player mode. Not great. And then, a big topic with this game forever has been the cheating situation. And, to their credit, you will never eliminate cheaters from any game. There will always be some cheaters. If a game has an audience, if a game has notoriety, it's going to have cheaters. And that's fine. I don't even fault them for that. What I do fault them for, and this kind of starts to get into some of the shady stuff about them, is that there is some thought around the idea that they don't hardware ban cheaters. So in the theory of it, they say they do, but it's been kind of disputed to a point. Long story short, there's at least somewhat of a conspiracy that they essentially count on banned people to buy more versions of the game, and it makes them more money. Because and that may sound silly at first, but when you find out that a large number of the people who are cheating are doing basically, it's called RMT, but it's where there's some items in the game that are so hard to find that cheaters can find them very easily and then sell them on the market, or cheaters will boost up an account to full whatever and then sell that account to someone else because there's people who don't want to do it, or cheaters will take someone's account, boost it up, and then give it back, and it's essentially a shepherding service in some capacity. That's a thing, and it's a really common thing. I've even seen ads for this on Facebook before, which is insane to me. I've seen them on YouTube as well. This game, it's so wild because things that they've been working on and testing for years don't work right. The game looks old at this point. It looks 8 years old. I saw people trying to be like, oh, Tarkov looks better than Battlefield 6. There may be, I find that I don't agree. Basically, it looks old, especially the player models. Good Lord. It legit looks like a PS3 game. Some of the player models and things like that just look really, really, really bad. And with all of that said, the game does some things uniquely that no other games do. I think the gunplay in Tarkov is unique, and no other game does it the same or as well. And you know, some of the movement stuff and all that, you know, there is a reason people keep playing this game, but there's also this weird situation where they're going 1.0. This is supposed to be the high point of the game. And I would argue that there's a really good chance that even when it launches 1.0, it won't reach the peaks it made, you know, player base wise 3 or 4 years ago. I think the game was the most popular it ever was, you know, 2 or 3 years ago. And I think it's been a downward trend ever since then, you know, because of other games, because of things and choices made in this one. You know, what's so wild is a few months ago, or a couple months ago, they did a big update to the game, and they do these things called wipes. So when they do a wipe, your whole character gets wiped to zero. You start over completely. You have to do all the tasks and all the progression, all that again. And this time, the wipe before their 1.0 launch, they decided to make it a hardcore wipe, which made the game essentially impossibly hard for regular people trying to play it who don't stream it, play it 24/7. And they didn't even do it that creatively. Like, it's not like they added a bunch of new rewards and challenges. They just made everything twice as hard. Like, literally, they just times two'd the number of enemies you had to kill for some tasks, the number of items you had to collect for different tasks, and things like that. They just times two'd everything, and then made it so you can't buy a bunch of stuff that is essential, and made everything way more expensive that you could buy. And it just, you know, the vibe isn't great around the game, and it was likely the worst decision they could have possibly made in the lead up to the final version of the game. I just, you know, supposedly they're adding this whole single player campaign. You're going to actually be able to escape from Tarkov, a task that you can't actually do in the 8 years of, you know, testing of this game. But supposedly there's going to be like cinematics and story missions and all this stuff in here. Like, please remember what I said before. They've been testing things in this game, some of them for 8 years, that still don't work. And we're supposed to believe that they're going to release this game, and it's just magically day one on 1.0 going to be ready, and it's all going to work right, and it's all going to be fine. Like, it's not going to be. It's going to be a complete mess. The only cool thing about it is that I believe this means the game will be going to Steam and to other launchers. So if you no longer want to use their launcher, which I don't, I hate having their software on my computer. I believe you're going to be able to buy it through Steam. But, you know, for people like me who have spent more money than I want to admit on, even though supposedly you were getting Steam codes, but I don't know if that's still true or not. If you have to buy it again, you know, you're talking about hundreds of dollars that you're going to have to rebuy this game for. So we'll see. You know, you can probably tell from what I've been saying, I'm not confident this is going to go well. It's been years at this point since I've like really wanted to grind this game, but it's always caught my interest again. I've always jumped back in at least for a week or two when they have big updates or whatever. I'm always going to be curious, and I hope I'm wrong. It's just, you know, there's also a lot of bad vibes around the studio who makes it. They're based in Russia, and while that's not inherently bad, and I'm not suggesting that, there is some reason to believe that like their owner may have, you know, at least at one point been involved with some of the private military companies like Wagner, to do consulting on their game back in the day. Now that likely would have been before the Ukraine war began, when Russia invaded Ukraine. And you know, I don't think there's any reason to believe that there's still ongoing involvement there, but you know, there's always that chance. And I just, as someone who follows that conflict and pretty closely, it just kind of makes me uneasy to, in any way, shape, or form, tacitly support a company who may be supporting the other side of that situation very directly. But that kind of turns into a different conversation. I'm wishing the best for them, especially for the players. People have been waiting a long time for this 1.0. It would be cool if it wasn't a complete crap show. I would like to be proven wrong. At Gamescom, Ubisoft's massive studio has announced a various number of things, some ongoing content for The Division 2. They talked a bit about Resurgence, the mobile game that I believe is a prequel to 2. It takes place between 1 and 2. Could be wrong. You can correct me if you want. But the big thing they announced was The Division 2 survivors. So when they did some teases recently, I think I made a whole topic in the podcast, they were teasing snow and in the DC in Washington DC. So not the small New York map, not the small Brooklyn map, not back in the Division 1, but in Division 2, Washington DC covered in snow. And my initial guess, and I'm sure many other people's, was, oh wow, they're bringing back survival. And we were, I think, either on stream or something, we were speculating about what that could mean, how they could, they can't do survival the same as Division 1 because the way the map was in Division 1, it really lent itself to that mode, where Division 3, Division 1 had just one DZ, this one location that everyone would go to for the survival battle royale kind of extraction mode game, where Division 2 has 3 DZs. So maybe they're going to split the map into 3s and, you'll just randomly matchmake into one of them or something. I don't know. But it does sound like they're bringing back some kind of survival experience. Now, from the conversation around it that they had, they didn't give many details. I interpreted much of what they said as this is going to be like Survivor Plus. So I assume they're going to adapt the base idea of Survivor from Division 1, the DLC, to Division 2, and do some kind of round or round-based mode where you go in, you upgrade your character, your weapons, gear, all of that. You collect something, and then you try to get out, probably through one of the DZs. So what they said, though, was that this isn't just a remake of the original Survivor in Division 2, that they're adding more to it and all that. But that's as far as they went. What's a little concerning, I think, is that they talked about this being in early stages. They showed off only concept art and like the logo for it at this point. And the director of the game, because this is getting talked about like it's a separate game, basically said that he'll be able to talk more about it next year at Gamescom. So a year from now, they'll be able to start detailing the game. If I was someone who was excited for this and wanted to come out, I would be a little concerned about that. If you want me to be straight up, if you want my personal opinion, that would not be very exciting for me. We in the last few years had the Division Heartland, which was supposed to be this kind of spin-off, just to throw out and probably break an NDA here. That was supposed to be survival. By Red Storm was supposed to, from what I'm under the impression of, was supposed to make Survival 2.0 for Division 2. They pitched that project, turning it into a standalone game, which eventually became Heartland and was eventually canceled. I have a lot to say about it. I don't know when or how I can talk about that stuff. We'll get to it one day. But this, I'm afraid, will just be that again. Now, this is internal. I believe this is at Massive. And so, that does help. It's not like a satellite studio or a support studio doing this. Massive itself seems to have quite a bit of pull at Ubisoft. So maybe it's a little safer because of that. I think calling it the Division 2 Survivors is a terrible idea. I think it should just be the Division Survivors. I think attaching 2 to it causes them all kinds of issues. Namely, it's a bit concerning that this game is almost certainly 2 or 3 years away, at least. And that implies that they're calling it Division 2 Survivors, that they're not expecting Division 3 in that time, because you can't release Division 3 in, 3 years and then release Division 2 Survivors after that or around the same time, right? So I find that interesting. I just, man, they're going to continue supporting Division 2. I've personally become pretty tired of that content. I need to try, maybe I should try to get more into it and stop being so, whatever about it. But I wish they would let it die. I wish they would just wrap it up. I think that's my bigger issue is, I totally understand them putting out more content, giving people reason to buy more battle passes and all that crap. But like, just the fact that they keep pushing the story along, and in my opinion, at least, the story just keeps getting more silly and dumb and hard to move on with, with the next game, maybe one day Division 3. But that's what they're doing. They're continuing that, and for what it's worth, they're ambitious. They keep trying to do big things with the story and with the content that comes out. Even though I'm under the impression they're doing it with a pretty small team, so we'll see. But I really thought maybe we would get at least a mention of Division 3 here, but they didn't. They showed off a like a timeline of what's coming up. They do have a big event they're teasing for March of 2026, which will be the 10-year anniversary of the Division 1 coming out. I think that's where they will probably talk about Division 3 for the first time. I think it's literally just going to be them being like, yep, we're working on it. It'll be out one day. And that's going to be it. I don't expect it to be more than that, but I could be wrong. So yeah, we'll see. I love my Division. I just want something new. Pete Parsons over at Bungie, the CEO, is stepping down. They posted a blog this week. I believe it was here on Friday, talking about handing over power to some other people who are already there. This is fairly notable from what I'm aware of. I'll be honest, I don't like Destiny. I just don't enjoy it. I like the Division despite the fact that it's a looter game, not because of it, and Destiny does not tickle my fancy at all. So I'm mostly, most of what I know about Destiny is secondhand. I'm under the impression Pete Parsons isn't liked very much. If I remember correctly, he was the one who he buys like tons of like exotic cars and lives this really kind of wild lifestyle, or at least expensive lifestyle, while his studio has kind of been in shambles and they've laid people off and gotten smaller, and Sony has taken more control over them, even though they were supposed to be independent when they got acquired by Sony instead of PlayStation and all this stuff. For the most part, I saw this being celebrated. I saw this mostly people being like, oh, thank goodness. I'm not really under the impression there was anyone in the line of succession there that is necessarily going to be much better, who wasn't already in some kind of power position and maybe not using it very well. But this seems like it's one of those things where people aren't super worried about who comes next. They just seem kind of happy he's gone. We'll see, man. I mean, Bungie is a weird studio. Back when they left Microsoft, I can't remember if they went independent for a bit. I think they did. There was all this talk of like, oh man, how does Microsoft lose the Halo studio, right? And then Microsoft made another studio just to work on Halo games, which is, had its ups and downs. But then Bungie, they did Destiny, and that was a big hit. And then at some point in there, they got acquired by Activision, and I believe that's when Destiny 2 came out. And then they left Activision, and then they were independent for a little bit, and now they're with PlayStation. Actually, there was Sony, not PlayStation. They were acquired specifically by Sony, and there were all these agreements that that Destiny would remain multi-platform. Their next game, which became Marathon, would be multi-platform as well. That this was a Sony thing and they weren't necessarily a PlayStation studio. Well, Marathon hasn't been received very well, has had a bunch of its own issues. Destiny 2 has had its ups and downs. I believe one of the recent DLCs was really good and liked, but I suspect that even when things are going well for them, in the big picture, it's probably still not that great. As the popularity and the player base of that game probably just wanes a bit. And, as far as we know, there's no Destiny 3 in the works. Marathon seems like it's at risk of not even coming out. And, it's a weird times over there. The common belief at this point is that if Marathon especially doesn't do well, which it looks like it might not, that it's pretty likely that Sony will put Bungie underneath PlayStation, and it could either be turned into like a co-dev studio. It could just get absorbed by another studio. It could just get shut down and the people moved around and laid off. We don't know, but it kind of seems like the eventual move of Sony being their owners to PlayStation being their owners is almost certain at some point in the relatively near future, and we'll have to see if that's a good or bad thing. I'm sure it wasn't completely their decision, and I don't think that a Destiny 3 would fix everything that they need to fix, but I suspect a Destiny 3 being in the works at least would have people looking at Bungie in a more optimistic way. As for optimism, Battlefield 6 devs have given a debriefing talking about changes coming from everything they saw during the 2 weekends of open beta. The big thing they talked about, which has been a fun topic to pay attention to, is some movement changes. Basically, they're making it so when you slide, you don't slide as far. When you move side to side, It's just more limited. When you jump, especially when you jump repeatedly, your accuracy on your gun gets way, way worse. There were some pretty shared videos from the beta of, these Call of Duty players literally bounding around the map and flying around corners and killing people and playing Battlefield in a way that DICE definitely doesn't want people to play, and in a way that you could argue they were exploiting, issues in the game. And they seem pretty dedicated in them not allowing that to happen, as well as people climbing into parts of the map they aren't supposed to be in, like on rooftops and maps where you're not supposed to be on rooftops, as well as some other things. So all the movement stuff I thought was really great. They talked about weapon balancing kind of generically, but they did specify that the shotgun, and I assume there will be multiple shotguns in the final game, will require more pellets to hit a player to kill them. Where it seems like maybe that number was too low. You could kind of just wing people with the shotgun in the betas and they would just die. Seems like here you're gonna have to like legitimately hit them with like a full body shot to be able to take them down, which is how it should be. Whether it's realistic or not, I personally don't care. It's for balancing purposes. Bigger maps was a big topic, and they kind of assured everyone, yep, we have bigger maps coming. We just wanted to focus on the smaller stuff for these betas. We'll see if that's true or not. And then a big topic was Rush and the various ways they want to make Rush better, but also some pushback by them of, people want Rush to be a bigger mode. Right now it's only 12 on 12, which is tiny. That's a small mode for a Battlefield game. They've done as big as 64v64 or 32v32 for Rush. And has its own issues, right? I would like Rush to have more players. I think like 16v16 or 20v20 would be ideal. But they kind of seemed like they were sticking to their guns with that. And it's going to stay 12v12. We'll have to wait and find out. I'm not super worried about it. I'm just going to play Conquest or Breakthrough 20% or 90% of the time. So I'm not super worried about it. And they did push out a Battlefield 2042 event where you can unlock, I think it's like 30 cosmetics for Battlefield 6 if you play through this big battle pass they have for 2042. Look, Battlefield 2042 isn't the best Battlefield game ever made. I still think it's a pretty good game. It does provide a lot of that unique Battlefield gameplay, even if it's not the best version of it. I've still put almost 400 hours into that game over the years. If you are going to play Battlefield 6, I think you can get 2042 for like under $5. If you at least just want to get some of these cosmetics and have something similar to play until October 10th, I would suggest checking it out. I like it. I think it's a good game. It's just a little too arcadey, but I got it over 8 years ago. Hitting some of the smaller stories here, we have possible upgrades being rumored to Xbox's streaming service. One of the big parts of this being a potential for a cheaper streaming only Game Pass tier, which would be interesting. Rod Ferguson is going to Cloud Chamber Games to help them ship BioShock 4. So that game has been, once again, I believe, internally delayed. About 1/3 of the studio has been laid off, and they're bringing in Rod Ferguson to finish the game. This is a bit ironic because if you remember the saga of BioShock Infinite, Rod Ferguson was brought in late in its development to get it shipped as well. So he's like the BioShock whisperer, I guess. I actually like Infinite. A lot of people don't. And I'm at least curious about a BioShock 4. It's not really my main franchise. I just, I like the games in general, but I'm not obsessed with them. But I am curious about a BioShock 4. And hopefully he can land the ship, because their whole situation doesn't look great. Hollow Knight Silksong has finally gotten a release date. It's going to be September 4th of 2025, here in just a few weeks. This is I'm not familiar with Hollow Knight. I've never played it. But I will say that the obsession with when Silksong is coming out and the way people have just frothed over this and freaked out at every game show, every showcase, wondering if this game would be shown or announced or whatever, it kind of came to a head this year. Obviously, now we have a release date. I've made the joke that it would be kind of funny if it was like a 4 out of 10 game. I doubt it will be. The previews I've seen of it, people seem pretty high on it. Maybe I should check out the first one. But I did find it to be, I hope it's good. because people being this crazy about it for years, it would feel kind of pointless if it's not good. We'll have to wait and see. The Expanse Osiris Reborn by Owlcat Games showed off some environments in a trailer. They look amazing, more than ever. I hope this is a big inspiration, or maybe like a preview to what we may see from like a Mass Effect 5 type game. It just looks great. The aesthetic is good. The combat looks good. Everything they showed looks awesome. It looks like a really cool, grounded, sci-fi space game that will, kind of scratch that itch for people like me waiting for some more of that stuff, as well as Outer Worlds 2 coming out here in the next couple months. What's so wild is that you have like Mass Effect 5 coming one day, The Expanse Osiris Reborn coming, I believe, in 2026, and then you have Exodus. It's this like these three games that are kind of in the same genre, or at least we assume it is. We just started hearing like the Expanse game. It's fairly new. We only knew it existed fairly recently. I believe in June, and we know. I think so, that we know so much more about it than this Exodus game being made by a bunch of former Mass Effect devs and stuff like that under Hasbro with their studio. I think it's Archetype Games, and we've seen nothing. They put out like a book and like an art book or something. They have this referral program thing that seems kind of janky in my opinion. They keep doing these like dev blogs, or they were doing them for a while, where they just never said anything. They just kind of, oh, I sure hope the game can do this thing, but not actually talking about the game. They've shown like snippets of what looked like super pre-alpha gameplay in a while ago. And then fairly recently in a blog, they showed like this composite concept art thing that looked like it might have actually been using some assets from a game. I have no idea, but it looked really bad. It looked really, really, really terrible. And so Exodus is like such a mystery to me. I have no idea if it even exists, if it's ever going to come out. Who knows? It seems like we're going to be waiting a while before we find out. Helldivers 2 showed off a Halo ODST Warbond. Warbond is like their version of a battle pass, and they're putting in a bunch of Halo weapons and armor and such, and capes, I believe, into Helldivers 2 to celebrate the addition of Xbox to the platforms that game is going to be on. I am such a weird spot with that because I only recently found out that it's not going to have cross progression. So if you want to play Helldivers 2 on your Xbox and you already have, 40, 50 hours on PC like I do, you have to start from scratch, which I find to be pretty lame. It is 2025. That should not still be a thing, but here we are. I hope they figure out a way to do some kind of cross progression, because I'm probably gonna not buy that game. I have a pre-order in, but I'm likely gonna cancel it if I can't carry over my character. I like Helldivers 2. It's a super cool game. I have zero desire to start from scratch again. Black Myth Wukong launched on Xbox this week, very conveniently, exactly 1 year after its release on PlayStation. I will still argue till I'm blue in the face that this game very obviously had a 1 year exclusivity deal, mostly because of the timing of this, even though they claim it's just a date that is really important to them, and that's when they do things. Whatever, I guess. As well as the fact that Xbox, official Xbox communication multiple times insinuated there was a deal. They didn't just come out and say it, but they did say, hey, we can't affect the deals that the games make with other publishers and platforms, but we'll be excited to have Wukong on our platform when we can. Was essentially the message multiple times. This is frustrating to me because there's this whole in general a negative outlook on Xbox, at least from a lot of journalists and content creators, influencers, and parts of the gaming community. And this developer playing into that and doing the whole, oh, the Series X is a challenge, we might not be able to put our game on there, and then it comes out and it has a 60 FPS mode on Series S. It's just hilarious. It's and Battlefield 6 did too, this super graphically and work intense game, looks just fine on the Series S, within expectation. Um, I don't know. I would never encourage anyone to buy this game or to have anything to do with this developer. I think that they're, after I think the head of the studio, like, very clearly just lied about the Series S being why the game wasn't there when they had clearly taken some kind of deal from PlayStation. It just makes them a no-go for me, at least. So I'll leave that up to you. And then at Gamescom, they announced a sequel somehow. It was just a cinematic. They probably haven't even started making it yet. It's probably 2 or 3 years away, but the game sold a lot of copies, mostly not in the West, and that doesn't really matter. They sold a bunch of copies, good for them. But it was a game that I found was talked about more because for performative reasons than the actual game. And I think it's lack of performance and the Game Awards and things like that kind of proved that to be true. And then finally, we did have Gamescom this week. Opening night live, Jeff Keighley's show was predictably unremarkable. Funny enough, at least to me, the best part of it was the Fallout TV show. The season 2 trailer was shown, and it looks insanely good. It's super exciting. I'm just so pumped for that. It looked great. Other than that, it was just a bunch of slop, man. Like, there were some cool announcements. They showed Resident Evil Requiem, the Resident Evil 9, I believe it is. I think that game looks awful, and I'm seeing other takes on it that are different, which is totally fine. I'm not the end all be all. I don't like the more recent Resident Evils. I hate the first person mode, even though this one technically has third person, but you can tell they don't want you to play it that way. I don't know. I miss the Resident Evil 2 days, man. And you know what? I've got Resident Evil 2 remake. It's amazing. So if I want to play it, I guess it's right there. I wish they would get away from doing this. Just like, I don't know. It just doesn't look exciting. And honestly, technically, I thought it looked kind of bad. I thought the animations on the characters in this trailer looked terrible. Some of the environmental work looked pretty good. The lighting was really pretty. They obviously, are using the RE engine well for that. But the actual, man, that engine just cannot do hair. I don't know if it's worse or is Decima with Death Stranding 2. I don't know which engine does hair worse, but it looks like everyone's hair has a different gravity than everything else in the game. I don't get it. It's that's beyond me. But yeah, I found Gamescom to be pretty underwhelming in general. There were some cool panels, some cool info came out, but more than anything, the Fallout TV show, the season 2 trailer is easily my highlight of that whole show, for better or worse. Getting into some content updates and closing thoughts here. I'm finishing up the Mass Effect 3 VODs, streaming, modded playthrough I'm doing. I have one more stream left. I'm at the Cerberus headquarters or whatever. I'm going to do that and then do, the Taking Back Earth. And then we are going to move on to Andromeda. Actually, I'm haven't done a playthrough in a while. I've only ever played Andromeda on Xbox Series X, and it is not like FPS boosted or anything there, so it looks and plays like crap. So I plan on trying to play it. I'm gonna do some light, like, quality of life modding. There's not that many mods for that game, so but I did see that there is I don't know if it's a newer mod or something, but kind of like a community patch mod there, and some other things I'm gonna throw in there so it's a little more tolerable to play. So we will we'll be taking care of that. I'll keep doing the podcast. I don't foresee a Mass Effect episode coming up unless there's some big the Hypecast, unless there's some big news that happens. We'll probably save that for October before N7 Day. And I'll keep streaming, keep shit posting on social media and all that stuff. And if you're still hanging with me, well, then I really appreciate that. Thank you. And that is where we will wrap it up. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and thank you to everyone who supports as YouTube members and or Twitch subscribers. If you have Amazon Prime, please throw me that Prime sub. I would very much appreciate it. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, please check out the links in the show description. If you have any questions or feedback, hit me up on social media at Bondiesel or at the Baunfire. join my Discord via the Linktree link in the episode description, or comment on Spotify or YouTube. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So until next time.